Thanks, everyone. I hope my mic's on. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's on. Cool. First of all, thanks a lot for coming to this rejuvenation session of Refresh, sort of. And I hope the team will make it a new tradition. So back in the day, I'm just using the opportunity to give 2 sentences about why we got started with Refresh in the first place back in the day. So we reckon there were already quite a few conferences around for developers, specifically backend developers. So there was whatever, Geek Out and whatnot happening in Estonia. But then we reckoned we'd want to spice it up a little bit, and in an environment where everybody seemed to be building digital products and launching startups, but not only, also doing really cool stuff in the public sector and corporations and enterprises. We felt maybe let's bring all these amazing product people, analysts, designers, front-end people together and give them something to talk about and something to chew on. So did that for a couple of years, felt it was a good time to take a break, and now the Refresh is alive and kicking again. So thanks a lot for the team for that. However, I'm here. Well, I couldn't be talking to you about product development in Bolt. So I'm very proud and happy that the organizers and the program committee gave me a chance to talk about a bit of a personal journey, which I would hope and think everyone in any organization really, but especially anyone trying to get by and make things happen in a fast-paced environment in dynamic, autonomous, self-guiding teams that most of us strive for nowadays. Will benefit from, and it might sound a little bit meta, but I do hope I can give your Thursday morning a good kickstart. So let's dive in. The joy and usefulness of feedback loops. A couple of words about myself. Currently, I'm CTO at an investment company called Grünfin. What we do is we make sustainable investing easy and accessible for everyone. I used to be a director of engineering at Wise, also when we started Refresh. Did some stuff there, built up some product teams, built up our platform team, and hopefully didn't mess things up too much, despite not really knowing anything about how to build big companies. And yeah, now Grünfin, here talking to you. My current professional mission is to make sustainable investments easy and accessible for everyone. So a shameless plug, please do go and check us out. We're out there, even if you don't know anything about investing, but you want a bit of a peace of mind when you save up and want to put your money to grow somewhere. We're there to help. My current personal mission, though, it's not even a current one. That's something I sort of keep coming back to. I really care about people wasting time, especially at work. I mean, everybody, we have our personal lives, and sometimes wasting time is the exact right thing to do to build up some energy and to recover and recreate. However, I think when we go out to build products, build companies, just do our jobs, we do sometimes waste a lot of time, and often it's not about having one coffee too much or spending too much time in the PlayStation corner. It's rather about just not noticing how we maybe are not working on the most fruitful things. And by unlocking these kinds of opportunities, I think everybody, especially leaders, but everybody can enable people to do a bit more than they would have expected from themselves in the first place. But this clearly also isn't a technical talk, so no front-end design here, no front-end development, no design. It's a little bit about actually getting yourself hurt, Well, anybody heavily into sports knows, like it needs to hurt sometimes. It's a little bit similar with any sort of professional type of feedback. But let's see. Let's see what your personal takeaways might be today. And we'll start a bit of a personal journey, as I said. We'll then zoom out a little bit and maybe like try to make it a bit more abstract and on the other hand, like more relevant and actionable. So my journey, or how I stopped worrying about and started yearning for feedback. Now, back in the day, 1992, something like 13 years old or so, I guess I've always been a bit of a programmer by heart, or at heart, and I got introduced to the joys of programming. First of all, in BASIC. Who's ever written a line in BASIC? Quite a few. That's cool. Oh, by the way, anyway, how many developer types in the room? Ooh, nice. How many designers? Same people, really? What? Okay, how many product managers? Okay, that's a healthy mix. So anyway, I'm writing my first lines of code in BASIC, and the problem with BASIC, at least back in the day, or like I think generally, if we don't speak about Visual Basic and sort of building fancy UIs with it, was that mostly it was run by interpreters, meaning that your program code actually sort of like got processed by the computer when you executed your program. And what that means is oftentimes, even if you made a really stupid typo, you didn't find out about it until you actually hit that place in your program. And what that means, like, it's not very clever. Some bugs might never be unearthed by yourself. Some of them just would be super annoying because kind of almost works, and then you discover about them. So a few years later, I was lucky enough to be introduced to the joys of compilers. So we like compiled languages are a little bit different, and at least like if you whatever, like make a proper typo somewhere or just get something syntactically wrong, they tell you before you actually like run your code. So you sort of learn about it a little bit sooner. And that's nice and useful if you're a programmer. And then a few more years passed, and I went to work for a bank. That really doesn't matter. It just happened to be, I still honestly believe, like, despite being a little bit sort of like enterprise vary nowadays, I think it was the organization back in the day, like early 2000s, where you really could learn to be a really good software developer. It's named Hansabank back in the day, just for a remark. But anyway, so I had really cool and smart colleagues there who then taught me about automated tests. So I figured, okay, well, like this is getting somewhere. Like now I actually can validate what I do even before I commit and push my code. Well, like not even talking about actually releasing broken stuff into production. So anybody who's done TDD, test-driven design, anyone? A few, I hope. Cool. So how it goes, at least in theory, is first you need to build something. You write a failing test, then you make it pass. You actually like build the functionality, and then if you make the test pass, you sort of go back and just make things tidy a little bit, like called refactoring. So you don't change the functionality, you just kind of clean up and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. Now, this is like a very technocratic way to look at actually building stuff. So obviously, from somewhere comes this input that you build your stuff sort of like upon. So there's a thing called behavior-driven design. This is really like a clunky term, and I'm not even sure if it really kind of like took off. But when we sort of start going more on the product development level, then you first like write a failing feature test. Let's imagine our customers, or as a customer, I want to have this button at the screen doing X, and then you sort of like write that test first, and then you your engineers maybe kind of like, or yourself, you go and do this like TDD loop, and in the end, you again, you clean things up. Maybe you clean up a bit of your design or your front end, and that's just sort of like encompassing a bit more. So that was really exciting for me for a while. Then I'm a bit of an extreme programming aficionado, so this is like a really insane feedback loop picture, which is sort of, that's all that it is. Please don't go into interpreting this too much. But the point being that that as an engineer, as a software developer, there's actually like quite a lot of validation happening on your work, like on different levels. So first, maybe, like as you do peer programming, you sort of like just chat about stuff, you throw out an idea, you receive feedback from your partner saying like, hey, maybe we could do this better in a different way. Then there are the unit tests we already discussed. Then there's like the iteration plan, like whether what we're planning to build just sort of like fits into our priorities and strategy and so on and so forth. And then I reckoned, okay, well, this is just like insane, but also like I just want to understand how my work as a software developer fits into the bigger product or business, right? So what is it that I'm building this for? I guess I just was this annoying kind of a guy who just didn't believe what my business side told me. I kind of always like doubted and wanted to see proof. I wanted the why questions answered, and when you start asking these questions, then like, well, this is a kind of an, I hope I've never produced a potentially shippable increment. Where's my laser? This is just weird. So I reckon that like if I just go deeper and deeper into basically like being super methodical about software development, I might be getting better at these methodologies, but I necessarily didn't feel this would like help me have more impact in my life. So I reckoned I kind of want, I still love programming, but I somehow want more than like these sort of methodologies in software development would be giving me. So in terms of feedback and feedback loops, I figured I should widen my loop. So I would want actually sort of like broader feedback on my work. So I built something, and I actually want to understand whether that's useful, whether anybody cares. And I went and joined a startup. That was the motivation in a way. I wanted to care more for what I was building, and I just didn't want it to be nice and excellent. But I really wanted to build something that mattered for people. And I felt, if your job function kind of constrains you from taking user stories and shipping code, you really don't necessarily get to do all that. You even if you like see the broader picture, you don't get to influence it too much. So I reckon joining a startup with a bunch of people barely knowing what they're doing might be a good way to to really exercise my cowboy mentality and get something done. So in the product development world, I'm really sure like this is a feedback loop many of you know. Like learn, measure, build, learn, measure, build. Sounds familiar for some at least. So the point of that is that you either learn or ideate about a customer problem. You then build something to meet that, which is sort of what this whole like BDD level stuff was about. And then finally you measure if it actually worked, like if it actually solved any of that problem or helped at all, right? So so that's that's the point of it, right? That's actually what we should care about as builders, whether we're building something useful for anybody. And a bit of a painful realization for me as this super cool software craftsman gone through years of agile development, extreme programming experience. I really wanted to take that experience into the startup and really show everyone, how you build good software and like how you kick ass as a programmer. And then I realized that building things right matters, but it only does matter if you're actually building the right things. And when you're building products, it's much harder to figure out whether you're building the right things than to just do them right. You can be as good of a craftsman or craftsperson you like, but you need to start with why and start with the understanding of whether you're building the right things. And when talking about like building the right things, like how do we keep ourselves on track? Like how do we know which things are right? So this brings on the need to build actual progress, right? So no features shipped, no lines of, nobody's stupid enough nowadays to count lines of code, but anyway, you sort of catch the drift. So like instead of some more technical measures, you'd need to look at the impact, and you need to figure out how do you measure it. So to do that, you need to define some metrics. And just to bring you examples, again, I'm sure like many of those are very familiar to you, like conversion, pretty obvious metric, clearly drives business forward. So like by measuring conversion, we can have at least some confidence that what we offer to the world in the way we offer it matters for some people. They actually come on our site and sign up and want our stuff. If you measure Net Promoter Score, for instance, we started with that at Wise about the time when I joined. So that's about virality, right? So if we talk about metrics that impact growth, well, conversion does. But even more importantly, if you want to get your like virality loop going and your word of mouth going, you kind of actually want to hear from people how likely they are to recommend your product. Well, or MNUs or any other like actual growth metric, like or also like some sort of a performance metric, like the time that it takes to complete the journey in your product. These all work, and it just needs to be like tangible and clear enough and tied to the actual customer experience, and then working towards that is something that would help you to meet their needs and demands. And as somebody coming from a more corporate environment, taking pride in building project X, Y, and Z, I once built something for about half a year that then got sacked because the new management didn't believe in it. But I think even worse are the stories where people spend time building something that then stays hidden in a complex menu that nobody ever discovers, or gets built in a way that's sort of like meant to address a problem, but nobody really uses it because it's somehow clunky. So whatever your features are, whatever you're building, whatever you release, unfortunately, as a product builder, this is not your output, right? Your output is the actual value you deliver to your customers. And until you get to that value and are able to show that in numbers, or at least in positive feedback, we kind of haven't made a dent, right? And that hurt us, like to figure that out. Like, it's fun to come to work and then just take your backlog and churn out items, but without that impact and meaning, you really haven't spent your time well. Maybe you have been honing your craft, which is fine, but on the other hand, that for me at least, like that just didn't feel good enough. So from the time when I was a junior dev, maybe 20 years ago, and then this chart ends maybe around the time when I left TransferWise. I reckon like 2 highly scientific and accurate graphs might represent that journey. So and I sort of I really feel that way, that that definitely, like any time I kind of unlocked some next level of understanding of my contribution, my confidence plummeted. But I actually do think like my real impact sort of like kept growing, right? Because I was still doing the work that I was doing, et cetera, and probably like learning more about like how to increase my footprint. But just like, man, like I've been thinking about this all wrong. And just to sort of look at these like bigger differences. I think one was sort of like getting into product building from sort of like software building alone. That was the features and releases are inputs, not outputs. And then I think the next one was more subtle. Like when I became a team lead, and soon after, like already had a few teams. Anyone who's been in a growing organization know how that gets crazy sometimes, and like it's 3 people and then there's 13, and then you need to like split your team, and it's like was the moment when I like when one realizes that much of their impact actually comes from working through other people. And when you talk about like measuring net promoter score or measuring conversion, these are pretty easy to measure. Your impact as a lead and your efficiency as a lead, efficacy, and all these words. It gets tricky, when you need to work through people, and when a big part of your work is actually getting people to do stuff. Or maybe getting people to think differently about stuff. Like, how do you really like measure that? So that's tricky. But yeah, coming back to the metrics, just to reiterate, in order to really like build these products, you do need the right metrics. However, to kind of keep a bigger team or an organization on track, you really need like a set of teams. I'll call the teams need to have their own metrics, right? Because as a group, like the 4 or 8 people we come together, we still need to work towards something. And at some point, I can bring you an example, like a real life example. As I said, we started measuring net promoter score at Wise, felt really good about it, and then suddenly realized that if we bring on a new big market, India comes to mind. I don't remember if that was relevant, but anyway, like new culture, new people, new use cases, new problems, and their happiness with your product might be very different from the rest of the world. But if your average NPS goes down, that definitely doesn't mean like the sort of rest of your product goes shit, right? It's still the same, just as good product. It's just that the averages change. So at some point you kind of like need to figure out how do you split it up? Like how do you get people to focus in a useful manner? But that was a bit of an anecdote. And then the teams are as good as their people, and my personal belief is that good people know how to take feedback, but really great people actually want it and almost cannot live without it, although it's a bit scary at first. So in the holy words of Elon Musk, maybe, I don't know if he was higher or not. I'm not a fan, but I think he makes a great quote. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. Even better if you actually ask somebody, like, might not be the best judge yourself. So I think if you actually want to change an organization for the better, you really need to think about feedback culture. And if we look for different definitions of culture, then culture is often defined by the time, defined as the things that we as a group do like repetitively, or basically just the things we really do. And in terms of feedback culture, that obviously is giving feedback. In engineering, a feedback loop is a part of the system in which some portion or all of the system's output is used as input for future operations, yada, yada, yada. But it actually does make sense. So you do have a feedback loop when you sort of care about the like output or impact of what you're doing. Sorry, you can take the photo if you want to. Anyway, so it's like choosing an action, then we perform the action, then we measure reaction, and then we analyze it, and that looks a bit familiar. That's actually this very same build, measure, learn all along. So you know, feedback loops, yeah, they're just feedback loops and work in the same way across different disciplines. So in terms of a couple of quick takeaways, first of all, you get what you measure, and if you measure if you measure whatever hours, billable hours, then that's what you're getting, and if you measure tickets delivered, then that's what you're getting. So that's like a definite sort of proof point to measure the right things. Charlie Munger said, "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome." Well, I think I have one more quote. I don't know. Yeah, we won't bother you too much with those. And more interestingly, though, so measuring the right things is sort of obvious, but if you measure the right things, your feedback loops, your metrics and your actions and their interaction actually shows you progress towards some goal, whether that's growth, whether that's efficiency. But if you're able to tie your metrics into that goal, make them closely related, what you do, you can sort of be sure about that it actually matters. And this is also what really gives you purpose. So if you know like how the work you're doing and the impact you're having translates into reaching some bigger goal for the company, organization, for the world at large, it's a good way to realize your purpose as an individual contributor, as a lead manager, whatever. The ability to solve problems by people and teams is constrained by their speed of learning, which means that if you're solving problems, if it would be like a cookie cutter thing where you just need to download a recipe and go A to Z and be done with it, you wouldn't have that problem. The fact that you have some problem sort of proves that you need to be creative in figuring it out. You need to try and learn and, well, probably fail. So that means you get to the solution to your problem the quickest if you kind of like learn the quickest. And now the speed that you learn at is directly dependent on the tightness of your feedback loops, right? So that means if you ask your customers for a net promoter score, just coming back to that example, if you ask that from them once per year, you probably would have like a pretty wide, or like you might be off the right path for quite long until you learn about it. So maybe you want to ask them constantly. You need to do like stuff like cohort analysis and kind of figure out what it all means, but effectively, like you make sure that you get like tangible, actionable data as soon as you can. It's the very same with people management and not just management. It's actually just like working with people in general. If there's somebody with toxic behavior in your team and you don't tell them about it, they can probably get some teammates to leave by the end of the year, right? If they don't learn that they need to change. So it's kind of the same again, you know. It's all about just being quick about it, and that keeps it relevant, that keeps it actionable. And to this point, you really actually already depend on a lot of feedback loops in your work and personal development. Like getting graded in elementary school is a feedback loop, right? And the sooner you start to spot patterns, like, or maybe for your kids as well. Some parents in the room, I'm assuming. I've got 4 by now, two of whom have gone through secondary. So anyway, the point being, you know, like the sooner you start paying attention, the sooner you can sort of help out or course correct. So So the point would be, you know, like it's practically speaking, it's also about like spotting these feedback loops in your life and then making those tighter. So I guess for myself, like when I was at the bank I mentioned previously, we had performance appraisals once per year, and everybody hated them. Okay, 95% hated them. And the 95% of people hated them because for the manager, it was just like, I clearly understand it was also my fault that I didn't have like more frequent one-on-ones with my people and actually sort of, you know, didn't give them more frequent feedback and hear back about their problems and their wishes. But still, the system was built thus that once per year I would need to go to somebody, say, hey, here's what I think about your performance. They would say, hey, here's what I think about my performance. And then yada, 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 yada. You can like already see where this is going. You know, this is not a great way to help somebody with their performance. So whenever you spot a feedback loop and actually that one that you find valuable, then it's a good effort to make it tighter, because even if it feels a bit scary, then be sure the quicker you receive the feedback, generally the less scary and hurtful it is. And in order to really do that, like one needs to overcome that fear a little bit. But we really don't learn. We just need the feedback in order to become better people, if that's something we care about. And then a bit of a bonus track, which got added. I've done this talk before, so it got added by the request of the organizers. Then I'm sorry, actually, can somebody upstairs tell me how much time do I have, because the clock doesn't help me much. It says 4:13 and it said 3:43 before. Does it mean it's been half an hour?
12 minutes left.
Got it. Awesome. Cool. So it's fun to take feedback, but if somebody comes to us and asks for it, or if we think we can help somebody, you know, it's not super obvious sometimes. So I've learned to come from a place of respect. I never assume I know the context that anybody operates in. They might think about their work and their companions, and yeah, they might just like think differently about where they're at and sometimes even what their goal is. And more importantly, you don't know. Like maybe their dog died, maybe their grandma's sick, right? So it always helps to start from a place of respect and just basically having no assumptions. People are great at storytelling. We really want to prepare ourselves. We tell before, you know, going to somebody to say something. Sometimes build up the courage by telling us a story about what's right, and it necessarily doesn't have to be. Feedback is a dish best served hot. Whenever somebody is doing something in a way that's either not very effective or maybe is toxic or something, it's very hard to go to someone and said, over the past 6 months, I have observed some occasions where you maybe have behaved inappropriately. I don't recall any of them, but just, you know, pay attention to that. Kind of like, yeah, no, I just feel like shit. So it's just, you know, it's just not very concrete. Be specific and as constructive as you can. It should be actionable to the very same point, you know, like you need to be able to take it and do something about it. Otherwise, it's just, you know, exactly, I just feel shit afterwards. And something that I'm personally trying to do is to become somebody that other people ask feedback from. So there's two sides to it. One is one is definitely like a little bit egocentric. I mean, who doesn't want to be who doesn't want their opinions to be cared about? But the other also is, I think you actually learn quite a bit about the world, and you maybe get to think about things that you otherwise wouldn't, or maybe you get that other person's perspective on something where you only had your own opinion before. So, do I have one more? No. We only have yet another quote. It's the last one in the presentation. It's by Bill Gates. We just all need these people, and that's how we improve. And now go and ask for feedback. But first, you can ask me questions if you have any. I would hope for, I don't know, 3 at least.
Great. Let's give a round of applause to Alvar as well before we go.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation, and definitely got some thoughts out of it. But a little bit challenging question for you. So I understand why you didn't mention it, but I think like very important feedback for like product companies also, like actually money. It's like elephant in the room. Do you get the money or not? It's a very like long circle to get the feedback, but I think it's something. Maybe you can like share your thoughts on it. Is it a feedback cycle for you, getting the money or not?
No, obviously it is. And I think that's a great question because I think for product companies, this comes down to monetization and whether anybody cares about what you offer enough to pay for it and whether you're clever enough to ask at the right time, etc. I think you mentioned it as well that money or revenue is a pretty long cycle sometimes, especially if part of your model really. I mean, if you're selling to enterprises, you obviously would not really offer them much free trials or something. You'd sort of get to that money a bit sooner maybe, but often there's like freemium models and whatnot, and you need some proxy metrics that you sort of reckon would get you closer to money in a way in the longer run. And I think many companies, well, Facebook included or Meta nowadays, I think that's very much the same model. Like they really just went for engagement and user growth and kind of reckoned they would figure out the monetization. But clearly, if you already have that user growth, if you get somebody's attention, you sort of reckon you offer something that's valuable to them. So I think that's the connection. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have time for at least one more.
Oh, there's 2. Amazing.
Thanks a lot for the great talk. Really made me think about my feedback loops. And do you have any tips on how to kind of desensitize someone who is really sensitive on taking the feedback?
Yeah, that's like usually behind that sensitivity is some sort of a why, and in my experience, it's a bit of a dangerous game to try and sort of assume the why. It can be all sorts of stuff. Like some people just have been maybe some just criticized too heavily, or some people's self-worth is very directly tied to the task at hand. So I don't think there's sort of like a clear recipe. I think something that's worked for me, and it comes from like conflict resolution playbook. For instance, it's first like starting from a common goal, and then kind of like coming from that perspective. Sort of like if we identify the common goal, and we both understand like the ways that we like contribute to it, or how we could, or what our role is. And then, like sort of first, hey, we're out there for the same thing, and maybe then get to like, like here's something I've thought about, about your work, or how you could be doing it differently. Well, yeah, you should be doing your work differently. Maybe isn't something to go out and say, but that's the sort of the idea.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the talk. I quite liked how the tips were very tangible and bullet pointed. Very good. Slightly personal, maybe not very useful for a lot of people, but what is the most memorable bit of feedback that you've personally received?
I guess the fact that nothing like this one single thing doesn't pop to mind is proof that I don't have anything quite like that. But I think it mostly evolves around like blind spots. So I'm a person who maybe spends too much effort in trying to like kind of figure out the world around them and also like their place in it and the way sort of like know the things I'm good at and know the things I'm bad at and then blind spots can exist in both ways. Like oftentimes it's with like tailwinds overall, like we necessarily as people don't notice the things that help us, and that also sort of involves like personality traits. But the same goes like to the other side, that that there might be, you know, like at least behaviors maybe like they don't need to be bad, but they might be behaviors that you feel don't help you along, and I think that's mostly been around those kinds of things that I haven't seen coming, you know.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Seems like no, but we have 3 minutes. I can also ask some questions. Why do you think why some companies have tighter feedback loops than other companies? Does it matter on, I don't know, the industry, how users are interacting with the product?
Yeah, this is an assumption now, right?
Mhm.
I think it comes down to culture and also leadership style a bit. So the organizations with really tight feedback loops that, well, maybe 2 or 3 that I've been in and some others I've heard about, have been quite autonomous and quite kind of like bottom up led, or kind of, you know, sometimes it's called holacracy or whatever. So basically meaning that you have a relatively flat organization with a lot of autonomy in it, and and people and teams like need to quite autonomously figure out what they build and do. And I think there the feedback loops tend to be tighter logically, because they sort of like need to be, because otherwise everyone just would be rambling around. Whereas maybe like through more top down, you just kind of like the trickle of information or the flow of information is a bit slower. And if everything goes through management or like through some whatever strategic level, then it just takes more time and everything kind of, you know, and that also is a good recipe, or like a situation where clearly this like individual contributor level sense of belonging and sense of purpose kind of crumbles a little bit, because it's such a big loop. I don't know how close to truth that is. I've definitely, like my experience with a few organizations I've been in for longer kind of echoes that way.
But a little follow-up, I have 1 minute. How do you balance that like need for a very tight feedback loop with having like a bigger, I don't know, company goal? How does those two like work together or work against each other?
I think they will work together well if you figure out like sort of a couple of layers to it. So in the end, like as for any enterprise, in the end it's money. Like, you know, you need money and funds to survive. You need revenue for that. That might be a pretty big loop. And then you kind of translate that down into, well, let's say, kind of like fees per customer or whatever, basically like revenue per customer, and then customer growth, and then all of these you maybe can break up into some more specific metrics that are relevant to you. So in the end, you kind of like have a maybe not very sort of scientific and tight, but still like a mechanic of sort of like a hierarchy. You know, you sort of feed into the success of your business, but you need to figure out what these smaller bits are. And then these smaller bits you can already assign people on or teams on and so on.
So that's the difficult part.
Very true, very true. Yeah, and it becomes more difficult if these change in time, and then you need to reallocate in something. So I guess the people in the organization also need to be ready for that.
Thank you, Alvar.
Thank you very much.